I did my research paper on lizard husbandry derived from their natural environment. It was a literature review by me, Jessica, and my wonderful mentor, Bianca Salazar. So to start off, why is it important to know how to care for lizards? As of 2017, the total population of pets, from 34 to 64% of it has been pet lizards. And some of these lizards come from reputable breeders or pet stores that know what they're doing, but a lot of them come from the illegal pet trade, where people are either inappropriately breeding the lizards together and they're not taking care of breeding for the best health concerns, or the animals are not being taken care of properly, or the lizards are taken from the wild, which should never happen. Since many of the lizards come from irreputable breeders or from the wild, many people, once they receive these lizards, they are unaware of how to take care of these lizards, because many of them are exotic, or they haven't done enough research on the specific lizard that they're getting. So knowing the proper husbandry for the lizard that you have, whether you got it from a pet store or somewhere reputable, or whether it was sourced from a less reputable breeder, it is important to know the proper husbandry so that the lizard can live a happy and a very long and healthy life. So some of the literature and articles that we used were field studies on wild lizards, and we used these specifically to show what the wild lizards should be, what the best conditions for them would be. So what their natural environment shows that they thrive in. We also used some literature that showed breeding programs for lizards, and these pieces of literature were really important because they showed how labs take care of their lizards and what kind of husbandry they use to have the most success in having their lizards reproduce, because only lizards that are healthy can reproduce successfully. We also used some literature on current guides and aspects of husbandry. So this was written by different journals that are showing people how to take care of their own lizards, which, and some of them come from a long time ago, and others of them are more recent to keep up with the new advances in the literature. And we also looked at veterinary papers on lizard illnesses. So what happens if people have poor husbandry, which most of the illnesses that occur within lizards are husbandry related issues. So to start off, husbandry is the care and cultivation of animals. And based off of all the literature that we reviewed, the best husbandry can be achieved when the captive lizard's environment mimics the environment of the wild lizard. And the 5 main categories that we looked at were diet, shelter, temperature, light, and sociality, which is how the lizard interacts with other lizards around it. So to start off, we have the diet, and the diet would be the food that is the biologically appropriate for the lizard. So this means that the lizard has adapted to eating that food and digesting it to be able to absorb the maximum amount of nutrients from that food that it's eating. So to start off, we have folivores, and folivores are lizards that eat plants, leaves, and fruits, so only plant matter. And one of the studies that we saw was a field study, and it focused on the green iguana, which is a folivore that only eats plant matter. And the study focused on taking the stomach contents of about 30 green iguanas, and they analyzed what was in their stomachs to show what the diet of a folivore would be in their natural environment. And of all the green iguanas, it was only plant matter, and it was about 26 different species. So there was a wide array of different plants that they would eat from their natural environment in the tropics of South America. And of this plant matter, there was leafy greens, flowers, and fruit. And this is significant to people who would keep green iguanas as pets, because they need to eat the same diet that they would eat in the wild as a pet. So every owner that would consider owning a green iguana needs to own a green iguana and feed them leafy greens, flowers, and fruit. And this is because they have been biologically evolved to digest these foods. So one example of this is that they have an enlarged cecum, which is a part of the digestive tract, and it is there to digest really hard to eat leaves that people wouldn't be able to eat and other animals wouldn't be able to eat, but they can eat it because in that part of their digestive tract, these plants can ferment, and then they can break down so that the lizard can appropriately take all the nutrients that they would usually get from the leaves. And this is important because many people currently are feeding their green iguanas dog and cat food or other human food, which is inappropriate for the way that their body was made, because the same dog and cat food, which would have meat, which folivores would never eat, and high amounts of fat, which also folivores would never consume in the wild, the meat and the fat can end up in their cecum, and then it can cause, the fermentation will cause a lot of gastrointestinal upset. So it is important to know the natural diet of folivores if you plan on having one as a pet, so that you do not cause any illnesses within your pet lizard. Another example are omnivorous lizards. Omnivorous lizards eat insects and plant matter. So there are two kinds of lizards that we focus on here that had studies conducted on them in the wild. So it would be the bearded dragons and the blue-tongued skinks. Both of them are from Australia. And within Australia, they eat similar things. The bearded dragons eat insects, termites, larvae, and crickets, fruits, vegetables, and bone matter. And blue-tongued skinks eat seeds, fruits, beetles, and animal fragments. And these nutritional profile was developed by scientists who took these two lizards and studied their stomach contents as well. And they broke down the contents into percentages. So insects were about 50 to 60%, fruits and vegetables were about to like 20 and 10%, and then bone matter was less than 10%. And it is interesting that they eat bone matter. Both of them had animal fragments and bone matter in their stomachs, because that provides a very necessary nutrient that many pet lizards are lacking in, which is calcium, because they do not eat bone matter and animal fragments in the diets that people provide for them, because many people think that since they're such tiny lizards, they wouldn't ever be able to in the wild kill any animal. But these lizards in the wild show that the bone matter and the animal fragments that they scavenge from just like leftovers is really important to their diet, because it gives them the calcium. So owners should see that and apply that to giving their lizards calcium supplements to be able to supply the necessary nutrients that they need. So the next category is shelter. And shelter provides a place for the lizard to hide from predators, for it to feel safe, and for it to express its natural behavior. A lizard's shelter needs to allow them to do what they would normally do in the wild. So for example, a green iguana would normally bask in trees, in very tall trees in the sun for most of the day. And they have very large territories, anywhere from 100,000 meters squared to like 200,000 meters squared. And this needs to be applied to their husbandry that they would have in captivity. Unfortunately, many people that own green iguanas don't provide them with any places to climb or anywhere to bask. They see them as or they house them like you would with a dog, just around their house. Unfortunately, this can cause many health problems for the iguanas, because they can become entangled in things around your house, or they can try to climb things that they shouldn't, and they will fall and injure themselves. So it is important for owners to be aware that if they own a lizard that needs to be in trees, or that has another specific environmental requirement that they would have in the wild, then they should also apply that to their husbandry in captivity. Another lizard that is similar is the leopard gecko. It lives in areas of Pakistan where it hides under rocks during the day, and it's crepuscular, which means that it comes up during dawn and dusk. So it's mostly active at night and at those times. So it needs a space to hide in the rocks, as well as a rocky substrate, because that is how its natural environment would be. And these natural environments are taken into consideration when labs are trying to breed their animals, because if the animal cannot express its natural behavior, it will become stressed, and it will spend too many resources trying to figure out how to hide or how to feel more safe in its environment. So many labs view the environmental conditions of their lizard in the wild and then apply that to their captivity, so that they feel more safe, and then they will have healthier hatchlings and they will be able to survive better. Another element that needs to be applied to the husbandry of captive lizards is the appropriate temperature. And the appropriate temperature is the temperature that specific lizard would have in the wild. So for example, all lizards need appropriate temperatures for bodily functions. So this is the temperature that the lizard requires to be at homeostasis. For most lizards, it's in between 22 degrees Celsius to a maximum of like 38 to 40 degrees Celsius, but some lizards can go a little bit below that or a little bit above that. All lizards also need a basking spot or a thermal gradient across their enclosure or across what they would normally have in the wild. And they use this to thermoregulate. So basically what they do is, if they have a set temperature that their body functions the best in, And to be able to process for all of their bodily functions to be able to work at the most efficient pace, they need to be between that range. So what they can do is when they are feeling colder than the accurate temperature for their body, they go into the sun and they bask. And then once they heat up to a certain point where it's getting to be too much, they can change to another location that's more shady so that they can stay within the temperature that they need to be. And this can be applied for all lizards in the wild, and it should be allowed for lizards in captivity so that they can thermoregulate themselves and they will be prone to less illnesses since their body will be able to function within the correct temperature. Additionally, all lizards should have seasonal changes, which are normal changes that occur in the temperature that would happen in the wild, and they should be able to see these temperatures within their enclosure too. So for example, there was a study that was conducted. There was a breeding program for lizards, and the lizards during the winter months had 9 hours of daylight time and then 14 or 15 hours of sunlight. No, yeah, of nighttime time, so that would mimic what they do in the wild. So during the winter time, the sunlight hours are shorter and the nighttime hours are longer. And then when the scientists tried to mimic the summer hours, they made longer summer hours. So 13 summer hours of daylight and then 11 hours of nighttime. And this day and night cycle is very important for lizards because it regulates their circadian rhythm. So if you were to have the light on or the heat on all day or all night, it would stress them out because they are not used to that and they're used to being in the wild and having the natural change of day and night. So this can be provided for lizards in captivity by giving them heating lamps, and heating lamps are like the one you see in the picture. They're overhead and they provide a thermal gradient from all across the cage. So they will heat up rocks for the lizard to bask on, or they will also like only heat up one area so that the lizard can be on the other side of the enclosure to be able to cool down its body temperature. There are also heating pads that go under the enclosure so that the lizard can regulate their heat by going under a rock or under another provided hiding spot so that they can heat up. But there's a big difference between the lizards that need an overhead light and the lizards that need just a heating pad. So the lizards that need just a heating pad can be the nocturnal lizards and the crepuscular lizards, because those are used to being out during the nighttime and they don't get that much sun. But some lizards that need a heating lamp that also has UV light would be diurnal lizards, which are out during the sun time. And I will go into the UV requirements next. So these are some of the temperatures for common pet lizards. There are leopard geckos, which live in Pakistan, and the temperatures that they would normally live in were observed by scientists. So they saw that they live between 22 and 24 degrees Celsius in the spring and 40 to 45 degrees Celsius in the summer. And these are the temperatures that people try to mimic within their own enclosures for their pets so that their pet can thermoregulate. Additionally, blue-tongued skinks live in Australia, and they also viewed that the temperatures that they like to be around in are 28 to 32 degrees Celsius. And anything above or below this could potentially injure or kill your lizard because their body will no longer be able to function at the extreme temperature. So it is very important to maintain the lizard's accurate temperature for what they would have in the wild. So next is light, and it is the irradiance of UV light from the sun. Now, not all lizards need UV light. UV light is the light that is irradiated from the sun. It has many different wavelengths. Like I said before, nocturnal and crepuscular lizards do not need UV light. So some of the main wavelengths are UVA and UVB. UVA can help with vision. So some lizards give off signals that are only seen in UVA light by other lizards. So that can help with social interactions. Also, lizards can see the irradiance of UVA light off of food. So it helps them recognize that. But for them to thrive in their enclosure, it has yet to be proven if UVA light is absolutely necessary for them. But for diurnal lizards, UVB light is absolutely necessary. Diurnal lizards are those who are out during the sun time hours, and they use the UVB light to synthesize vitamin D3. So they eat vitamin D3 in the food that they eat, which comes from insects and the other plants that they eat, and then to be able to synthesize it so that their body can use it to help create calcium, they need UVB light from the sun. So some examples of these lizards that need the UVB light would be the panther chameleon and the green iguana. A study was done on the panther chameleon that showed that lizards that did not have access to UVB light or vitamin D3 in their diet either died or were severely weak, or their eggs were either infertile or the shells on their eggs were extremely thin due to them not being able to create the calcium needed. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, those who did have a sufficient amount of UVB light and a medium amount of vitamin D3 were in excellent condition. Their eggs had a good shell of calcium, and then they didn't have any bone deformities, which is one of the common illnesses that come with having a lack of calcium. Another lizard is the green iguana that needs to have UVB light. They exhibit similar symptoms if they don't have UVB light, like metabolic bone disease, which is when there isn't enough calcium in the body to supply the bones with calcium, so then the bones start to deform, and if it's caught quick enough, you can give your lizard calcium, a supplement, but if it's not caught quick enough, then the lizard could potentially die from it. So how do you provide the correct UV for your lizard? There are two possible ways. You can use UV lamps, and there are many on the market. They range from between about 18 inches to 48 inches long, and they look like the light that you see on the bottom. It looks like a tube, and it irradiates UVB light to help diurnal lizards process the vitamin D3. Even though UV lamps are really good and they're good for smaller lizards that cannot be outside, real sunlight is more beneficial to lizards. So UV lamps can only provide a fraction of what the sun can actually provide of UVB. So the sunlight has anywhere from 10 times or to 100 times as much UVB as lamps do. And if you put your lizard in real sunlight, it will have to be in real sunlight for less time than if it were to just have UV lamps. Although there are some UV lamps that are very strong, but the literature has yet to show if those UV lamps are significantly better or are lacking compared to the real sunlight. So the last element of lizard husbandry is sociality, which is the social interactions between lizards housed together. Many people do house lizards together, but they do not necessarily need to be housed together. Lizards are typically not social animals. They are pretty territorial, and even though it doesn't have to be done, you definitely can house some lizards together. You should never house multiple males with a fewer number of females, because the males could potentially harass the females. But it is beneficial to the males to house one male with one female or one male with two females. There's a study done that housed one female with one male, one female with a female, males alone, and then females alone. And the females didn't see much benefit from being housed with another female or with a male, but the males that were housed alone saw considerably more stress than the males that were housed with a female. So the males that were housed with a female had higher testosterone and lower stress hormones. But even though it is possible, you also need to be aware that some lizards will just not get along. So you need to see the signs of aggression. Some of the signs of aggression are push-ups, standing on all four legs, having an open mouth, lateral compressions of the torso, and tail autonomy is a sign that one of your lizards has been aggressive to the other one. So in a study done on lizards that how lizards react to another lizard in their space, there was the study showed that if a lizard were to see another lizard that is like a neighbor lizard and it has been there for a long time, it will have very few aggressive reactions with it. If there is a brand new lizard within its space, it will have more aggressive reactions with it. And shocking finding was that if the lizard has a neighbor lizard that is suddenly displaced, so it has moved to a different part of the enclosure, the lizard will have more aggressive reactions towards that one because it feels like the neighbor lizard is now trying to take over its territory. So this needs to be taken into consideration when housing lizards together. So you need to slowly introduce the two lizards together by having a divider in the cage and having one lizard on one side and one lizard on the other side. And then if you see that they don't have that many aggressive interactions, you can remove the divider. Also within the enclosure to make sure that there's no competition and that the aggression isn't a result of competing for resources, there needs to be an adequate amount of resources. So two water dishes or multiple basking spots, multiple hiding spots, so that one lizard doesn't chase the other lizard away, and then that other lizard that tends to be the submissive one starts getting ill because it's not receiving the benefits of the resources within the enclosure. Another thing that should not be done within housing two lizards together is housing a smaller lizard with a bigger lizard. Two lizards that are about the same size will fight each other, but a lizard that is smaller, if it's housed with a lizard that is bigger, they will have more of a predator and prey dynamic, which can result to tail autonomy, which occurs when a lizard feels threatened and it is being held by another lizard, or it is being attacked by another lizard or another animal, and it voluntarily detaches its tail. So as you can see, the lizard in the picture below has voluntarily detached its tail and is growing back. If you see one of your lizards has lost its tail and it's being housed with another lizard, this is a sign that there can be a lot of aggression occurring between those two lizards, and they should be separated. So finally, some overall points is that these are the 5 main elements that should be considered when housing lizards together. They are all viewed from the lens of what would happen in the natural environment. So diet, shelter, temperature, and light, and sociality should all be seen from the view of how did these 5 elements happen in your lizard's wildlife, and how can you apply that to be the most similar in your own enclosure so that the lizard can have a life that is as natural to how they should be in the wild. And finally, I would like to thank my wonderful mentor, Bianca Salazar. She is a doctorate student who focuses on the mating systems of polymorphic lizards, and she is at the University of California, Merced. She helped me so much with this project. This was my first research paper ever, and she was so helpful with, I had never formatted it before. She helped me with all of that. She had so much good insight on lizards because she actually works with lizards and has seen their interactions, and she has helped set up the enclosures and perform experiments with them. So she knew all about the necessities for housing lizards and having proper husbandry. So I would just like to thank her a lot. And I'd like to also thank Talaria for providing me with this opportunity.